Welcome to another special episode of Ask an Elder. Today we flip the script and instead of interviewing an elder interviews a group of talented and visionary rising leaders. These young women noted the need for enhanced programming on their college campus and they sprung into action to make it happen. You don't want to miss this inspiring conversation and reflection on their rise to action in developing the Women of Color Summit at Dickinson College. Without further ado, the NBLE Project's Ask an Elder.
Isaiah 11:6, and a child shall lead them. In this case, young college women. Good evening and welcome to this special episode of Ask an Elder. Tonight we're going to flip the script, and instead of having a young rising leader interview an elder, I will assume the role of elder and I will interview this group of rising leaders who identified a need on the campus of Dickinson College and sprung into action to respond to that need. My name is Bronte Burley Jones, and I am the founding president of the Black Leadership and Empowerment Project. I also serve as the vice president for finance and administration at Dickinson College. Tonight, I am joined by a group of amazing young ladies who include a founding member, a visionary, and the executive planning committee of the Women of Color Summit at Dickinson College. During our time together this evening, we will learn from this group of visionary planners and leaders about the programming gap that these young women saw on campus and the actions that they took to address that need. Ladies, let's begin with introductions. Dana, can we start with you?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dana Marichaux, class of 2020, and I am one of the founding members of the Women of Color Summit. So I'd like to say I planted the seed that sort of sprouted.
Titi, I will swing to you.
Hi, my name is Titilope Oluwashola, and I am a part of the first planning committee for the Women of Color Summit.
Priti.
Hi, everyone. I'm Preeti Kanal. I was also part of the exec committee for the first year of the summit, and I graduated in 2019.
Elif.
Hello, my name is Elif Ersoy, and I was part of last year's executive planning committee, and I'm also class of 2020.
Okay. Amanda and Jimeno. Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Sola. I'm the class of 2022, and I go to Dickinson.
Jimeno.
Hi, my name is Jimena Yamane, class of 2022. I was the executive member for the second year, I guess, second and third, technically, but second.
And Sunny Ko, co-advisor for the summit.
Hi, my name is Sunny Ko. I'm actually a 2011 grad of Dickinson College, and I currently work in college advancement at Dickinson.
Okay, ladies, this is to be a conversation between me and you because you were indeed visionaries. You saw a need on the campus of Dickinson College, and you rose to the occasion. So I want our viewers to understand what you saw and then what you've done since then, and then how we keep that going. So Dana, I want to start with you. Can you talk to me about what led you, Sarah, and Tony into thinking that this kind of programming was necessary at Dickinson?
Yeah, of course. So the idea came about when I was a sophomore at Dickinson, and Tony Ann and Sarah were both juniors at the time. And so I always like to say the idea for the Women of Color Summit started in the bottom of the library because one day I was just at my desk doing some work, and Tony Ann came by with an alum from the economics department, I believe. And she identified as a woman of color. And so Tony Ann was taking her around, sort of giving her the update on Dickinson, and they stopped by my table and we winded up chit-chatting for about 45 minutes just about, her time at Dickinson, her major. She also mentioned the fact that that was her first time on campus in 10 years. And so that was kind of like very shocking to me because, a lot of I would say like our white counterparts, especially alums, would usually come back every year. And both of us kind of noticed like that there was a lack of diversity and representation in the alumni base that came back, and who were just very actively engaged at their time at Dickinson. So that's when Tony Ann, myself, and Sarah decided that, we want to do something about this. We, want to create something that will allow more alumni to come back of more of a diverse background, and we specifically wanted it to be for women of color. And sort of just an add-on piece to that, I remember sitting in one of my intro to policy management courses, and there was a campus-wide survey that went out, and one of the kind of responses that stuck out to me the most was that Black women at Dickinson felt disproportionately disconnected to the campus. So those two experiences sort of coupled together was really kind of the backbone and inspiration for the summit. And unfortunately, by the time we decided to have the summit, it was quite late in the year. But that's kind of when, these ladies came up and stepped up to the plate and really sort of did the groundwork and the visionary work, and sort of made the idea come to life. Oh, I think you're on mute, Bronte.
I am on mute. Thank you. So that seems like a good segue into TT and Preeti. And we'll get Joanne on with us in a second. But talk to me about how you started to then breathe life into this vision, and how you went about making this a reality. It's one thing to have a thought about a thing. It's another thing to make it happen. So bring us along on that journey. Neither one of you are shy, so let's go.
Sure. So, I think I found it fair that Preeti share first, because herself and Joanne and Owen actually had started working on this project after Tony Ann had graduated, and they pulled for some ladies who might be interested in the project. And I remember that day running into, I think it was Owen, and I ran into her at the library, and we're just catching up from study abroad, and I got to learn about the amazing work that Preeti, Joanne, and Un had started on building out this, vision of a Women of Color Summit. And so I remember our first meeting at 50 Moreland Ave, and we went there to meet with, someone from the office. Liz, thank you. So we met with Liz, and we, started brainstorming. And what we realized in the process was that it was a lot, and we were only 4 women, and it was only fair that we invited other women of color to, plan this committee plan this event so it could really be ours as a committee. So we expanded from being a group of 4 to a group of 12. And over that course of time, we created groups, different departments to work on things, because we realized that the vision that was presented to us was so great, and one that we didn't want to handle carelessly. And we wanted to be diligent in our approach of achieving it. So it was only fair that we invited other women of color to bring their experiences and their voices to the table and expertise, and make it a platform that we could have our own internships on campus. This could be the gig you needed to put on your portfolio, but also to create a space for ourselves on campus. As Dana mentioned, we did not see ourselves enjoying the campus environment, and we didn't know there was a survey to even prove that. But Preeti, please feel free to add on to what I missed there.
Yeah, thank you, TT. I think you covered a lot of it. We did start off, I think a big part of it was understanding that we needed the space for us and ourselves, but also for the bigger Dickinson community. But it wasn't until we were already planning the summit itself where we realized how big this idea actually was. It started off with us saying, let's do it, really passionate, and then getting into the details of it, the marketing, the project management aspect, the budgeting, where we were just like, whoa, like we're really doing this, and it's a big, responsibility. And I think the 12 women that came with us really, really helped us kind of push, I think, the 4 of us, the exec members, to understand and believe in ourselves that we can make this a really big thing. And it did end up happening. So it really ended up becoming something that we did as a group of women who stand for each other and together. And I think it was very powerful because we did it as a group and a team.
So can the two of you talk to me about those 12 women? Because some of the feedback that that we've gotten is that, how do I want to say this? That it's exclusionary, right? We're excluding people. There are people who think that it's just about Black women or that it's just about, right? I mean, so there are people who have tried to back this event into a box. So can you talk to me about the inclusive nature of the planning committee? Because I think that's really important for people to understand.
Do you want to go first, Titi?
No, go ahead, Titi.
Okay. So I think initially when we sent out applications around campus to, any woman who identified as woman of color could apply for multiple positions that we had open. And we didn't have any restrictions or criteria to begin with, other than the fact that you're really passionate and you want to do this with us. But as we went through the applications and we had our final team, our first meeting when we had, it was the most diverse group I've ever seen on campus, especially among women. And it wasn't intentional, but it just happened really naturally. And the exclusivity of it, I think it really came down to us understanding how comfortable we felt with each other in that space. And we wanted to continue having that comfortable space. And that's why we, decided that this was, yes, it was exclusive, but it was exclusive for creating a space where women identified as women of color. And it wasn't exclusive for what race you identified with or what ethnicity. Can you guys still hear me? Everybody just froze.
Yes.
Okay. And so, yeah, if you want to add on to that, go ahead.
I think it's also important for us to always remember that I will use a very sharp example, which is when white people are sitting at lunch tables together, and nobody ever thinks white people are sitting together. There are only white people there. So when we invite people of color to find community in majority white spaces, it often looks as it's exclusive, but really it's community and fellowship, and creating that safe space for us to find community to continue to thrive on campuses that are often challenging in environments and societies that make it very difficult for people of color to excel. And so the Women of Color of Summit did just that, inviting women of color to have a seat at their own table, to exist, to breathe, to thrive, and to not just thrive in our communal existence, but to find fellowship and say, how do we want to speak with our allies, those who are different from us, but also closely identify with us, because many of them are our friends. So we have not had the opportunity to also share our burden and to also create a space for us to excel.
So I'll open it up to others. I'm looking at Amanda and Jimeno and Elif and Sunny as well. There are people who make assumptions about what it means that we're hosting a Women of Color Summit. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about who's coming to the table and kind of the sense of sisterhood in the broadest sense that the summit creates? Any thoughts, feedback?
I can go ahead. I feel like I have an interesting perspective because I was brought into this project by Joanne. I was actually interviewing her for a different program, and she had brought up the survey that Dana referenced earlier, and we kind of got in this conversation, had nothing to do with the program she was interviewing for, but she emailed me after and asked if I wanted to be a part of it. And at the time, I wasn't sure, I hadn't heard of it. And so, I did a little bit of research on it, and I talked to her more about it. And I was excited to be in it. And I told Bronte this, but it was a space I didn't know I needed. And that's part of, understanding community and understanding, what Titi was talking about in terms of community. But once I was there with these amazing women and, we were talking about the need, for me, I kind of felt myself like unzipping and unpacking and starting to pour out a little bit. And as somebody who had been at Dickinson, 10 years prior and had gone through a lot of the same experiences, I was really fueled and started to become very passionate about what was happening here. And so, I've done a lot of reflection in my own experience at Dickinson as a student, as an alum, and now an employee. And it makes me really excited to be a part of the group. But it was not something that I was seeking because I had no idea that this was in me, that this need was in me. And so, whenever I describe it, that's what I say. And, I'm just honored to work with you guys. So thanks.
So Joanne, welcome. So I was holding on for you to come on because I want to talk about planning the first summit. And so what were you thinking? What were you hoping to achieve? What were the goals of the programming that you put in place in that first year? And I really want you to tease apart for me the fact that Saturday is reserved for women of color, and Sunday is when our allies can join us, because that has caused some tensions, right? Why can't we come? And that's been very deliberate. So unpack that for us.
Yes, of course. The vision, was a space where women of color can be empowered. I think the ladies mentioned already that survey. And in 2015, we hadn't anything to address that issue that was coming from, a school-wide event or school-wide initiative. A lot of the time, students put together initiatives themselves to kind of address their needs. But this was the first time where I think that we had the platform to really elevate our voices and create a space where we could see each other, hear each other, and feel empowered. And so that space is intentional because it doesn't exist outside, right? When you have everything else that caters to, a majority white space, it necessitates us being very protective of that space, right? But that does not mean that we want to just isolate that conversation, just leaving it there. And this is where the allyship day comes into play. We had one of our members, Madison Braybrook, who, brought up this idea of like, if we just have this conversation among ourselves, how do we want change to actually happen? We need allies. We need people to understand our perspective, also understand what allyship actually means, and have this dialogue. Because to be honest, those spaces don't actually exist. This dialogue about what allyship means, it doesn't happen often. And so that is why it's this invitation for conversation to talk about allyship for women of color, but also allyship in general. And I think if there's contention, if someone is feeling tension about, oh, why can't I be in this space? I would ask them to think about why they feel entitled to it, right? You have to unpack that. And that's privilege, right? And it's not for antagony or to point fingers. It's for us to be reflective about where is our privilege? Where are we, as a woman of color who is cisgender, right? Where is my privilege? We all have to think about positionality, and that's what Who Are Our Allies, our original title for that Sunday, called for, and it means.
Bronte, I think you're on mute again.
Yep. Joanne, while you have the floor, will you please introduce yourself?
Could you repeat that again?
Certainly. Can you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Of course. Sorry about that. I had some Wi-Fi issues. My name is Joanna Adebayo. I am a senior And I was a part of the first cohort of the planning the Women of Color.
Okay, before we pivot to the second year, can we talk about what kind of feedback did you have at the end of the first summit? What were your takeaways? And how did you prepare to pass the baton?
I can start, and the two ladies can add. So we did receive a couple of feedback because it was the first time we did it. There were a lot of discussions about inclusivity, not necessarily, opening it to everybody, but even within the woman of color, like who identifies as a woman of color. How are we generalizing what identifying as a woman of color means? And, how can we include the LGBTQ community in it? And that was something we hadn't originally discussed. So that was one of our biggest feedback we had received. Um, Another feedback we had was the result and the outcome. How do we want to, we have this summit, it happens during the weekend, people come together, we talk, discuss, how do we want to take this weekend and turn it into an action following the summit, for it to not just be a summit that happens every year, but for it to have more substantial effort that comes in Dickinson's policy, for example, right? What is Dickinson as a community and institution going to be doing for us following the summit? And for the next cohort, we wanted to pass the feedback, the outcomes, the results. We wanted the next cohort to kind of, take the baton. And so we did the whole over again. We did the whole interview application process again. And that's how we selected a couple women from the application. And then from those women, we interviewed some of them. And then we came up with the next cohort. But Joanne and Titi, please feel free to add.
Joanne,
no, I think you really covered it. There was definitely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So I think, Preeti, you really covered it. It was really, how can we establish the longevity of this, right? We really were focusing on how can we ensure that the foundation, the momentum for the first year doesn't just kind of fade away, right? And so we were thinking about areas that we knew that we needed help with. We tried to establish kind of this cushion of support systems, of people that would be able to support the next cohort, which is why I reached out to Sunny, and just kind of establishing that foundation. But definitely representation was a conversation even in the programming. People asked like, okay, what about LGBTQ plus women of color, women X, like where was that in terms of speaking, having speakers represented, right? So those are things that we're also thinking about, sure. And for identifying women on, thinking about that as we moved forward.
Okay.
And I'll finally just add that in addition to, making sure that we onboarded an amazing team of women who could continue the great legacy that we didn't think we were starting, but realized afterwards because of how much the campus saw a need for it, and even professors and women of color who work at Dickinson also found community for themselves. We decided, it would be important to write a deliverable. So we offered, we really gave a deliverable to the Dickinson administration for them to seek to implement the different things and ask that we were making, so that the Women of Color Summit would not just be a summit, but would actually do something for our community, Dickinson as a whole, which is why it's important for women of color and other communities to come together, because there's so much proof of what diversity does to advance the initiatives and missions of different organizations. And Dickinson is one of those entities. that could benefit from women of color coming together and realizing the amazing work ethic we have and diverse opinions and diverse experiences to offer the community as a whole.
Thanks, TT. So now we're going to kind of pivot. So we have year one under our belt. You've put some mechanisms in place to get the next planning team in place. So Dana, Jimeno, it's okay. Talk to me about how you pick up the baton, and you start to plan the continuity of the summit. So someone tell me how you grab the baton and start it moving.
Hi everyone, my name is Isoke Senghor and I'm class of 2020 and I was on the marketing executive of the Women of Color Summit for 2019 to 2020. And you just have to, thinking about picking up the baton, you have to think about what made your fire go when you attended those conferences. You have to think about the connections you made when you were in the library and you saw someone that you were working with over the weekend, or you saw at the summit and you had an awesome conversation with. You have to think about, okay, how can I have other people have those same opportunities, those same like fiery experiences, that same warm and fuzzies when you meet each other and you meet and you build community and sisterhood and friendship. And you have to be committed to doing the work. You have to wake up early. You have to send out the emails. You have to brainstorm. You have to ask questions and, think on your feet in the middle of a fundraiser. How to make bubble tea for 20 people who are waiting in line, How do we expand beyond Carlisle? How do we get our family involved? So, I think picking up the baton, it's not always easy, but you have to just keep going. You have to say, okay, this was awesome for me and I want to share. You have to be the gift that keeps on giving. And also resting. You have to rest. So knowing how to move through the marathon. And it's awesome to see you all.
Hey, it's okay. I can also talk a little bit about this. I think a lot of sort of picking up the baton and starting the Women of Color Summit for the second year was a lot about taking in the feedback and really having that translate to the public. And also not being afraid to take it up a notch. I think the second year was really amazing and really special because not only were we working with times that we didn't expect to come our way, but we were doing a lot of the groundwork and building momentum. So as soon as the second planning committee got confirmed, we were meeting over the summer. So not even during the academic year, we were getting organized and getting prepared for campus because we knew the impact that the first planning committee, we knew the groundwork and the great foundation that the first planning committee had set, and the bar was high and we wanted to reach it, and we wanted to outdo it, and rightfully so. We really outdid it. I think for me, as I had the time over the summer to really reflect on the Women of Color Summit, I think what was so beautiful was the amount of momentum that we built up for the summit. And there was so much anticipation, and for it to not happen, which I'll kind of get into in a second, the best analogy I can use was like, imagine shaking up like a bottle of soda. Like we were building all this momentum with all of our pre-workshop, which were spaces that were also very contentious because they were also, we had a lot of events that were exclusively for women of color, faculty and staff on campus. And, people were like, why can't we come? And we were like, we want you to understand that this space is reserved for us to be unapologetically and to show up unapologetically as ourselves. And so then fast forward to COVID, literally a week before the summer was supposed to happen, we were all placed on quarantine and we weren't allowed to go back on campus. But again, I think even though we were met with that, challenge that we didn't expect, we already had built up so much momentum that like the community and the drive to see this become a huge legacy was already there from the student body. And we also had excellent mentors, like shout out to Sunny and Bronte. I always want to just say how gracious I am for you guys, because I believe that you really helped shape the leaders that we all currently are. And so I think a lot of passing that baton came with a lot of challenges, but a lot of learning from the last year, and as well as like, you know, just thinking quickly on your feet, and sort of that. So yeah.
So can somebody talk about the planning and how much time you do put into thinking about what the workshops are going to be and who you're contacting, reaching out to alums? Because we did add some additional elements. We had a few special guests at this summit. So, I mean, how did you come up with the idea to bring those people along and make those connections? Because you can just attend and not know all the work that goes into making a thing happen. So, can somebody talk about that? Come on, ladies. Nobody here is shy.
Yes, I will say that you have to use your social platforms. And that's not just like the internet platforms like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and, you know, all these networking spaces, digital spaces. But you also have to talk to people and ask questions and tell your professors about it after class. So as a part of the marketing executive committee, we worked really hard to get people to know who we were. So we used lots of designing platforms. We worked on T-shirts, merchandise. We told our professors about it. We put up flyers all around campus. So we just had to make ourselves more visible as a collective, a part of the summit.
Bouncing off of Isoke, I agree with everything that she said, because like with networking, like since I was part of Mob, and when we were creating event spaces, when we were filling out all those forms, you know, I had done all of these, but there were also some times where I stumbled. So I would run over to Jesse and I would be like, hey, Jesse, like you have experience with this, like how can I do this? Or like if I had a question about the shirts, like she said, I would go over to Sunny and be like, hey Sunny, like what do you think about this? And like just asking other people, other folks as well, like do you think this color works better? Do you think this location works better? It was definitely important in bringing the whole thing together.
So let's talk about when the summit got, well, at first we didn't know what was going to happen to the spring semester, right? And so we were holding out hope. Then we were completely remote. And at some point over the summer, Jimeno, you reached out and said, how do we make this thing keep moving? Then you brought Amanda along. So talk to me about how you keep the baton moving when we literally didn't know whether we were coming back to campus in person, whether we're going to be remote. What inspired you to keep it going? And then how did you bring other people along, especially since we were remote in the fall semester?
That was a very long question, so I'll try to answer all of them at once. But I think as for like picking up the baton and continuing the Women of Color Summit, I do know the amount of work that we put in with Dana, Elif, Isoke, we can't forget about Sierra. The amount of work that we had put in that year was immense. It was incredible. And I didn't want that to go to waste because we had so much planning already done. And this was something that we were so excited for. I mean, like going to workshops and learning and listening to stories, but also getting dressed up, looking cute, taking photos and all of that. So yeah, that was definitely one of the reasons. But also, I think that at Dickinson, when something does come up or something is given more awareness to, it gets forgotten about most of the time. That's just how I feel. That's just my personal opinion. And I think that as for the Women of Color Summit, I don't want anyone to think that we just gave up because of a pandemic. I know that we can do it. I knew that I could do it. I could gather some students and work on it together. And I want every student at Dickinson to know that we're just unstoppable. Nothing can stop us to have this summit, to keep going. And hopefully for next year and the years after, I do want to create this sense of community, because I love having conversations with all of the women inside of this call. And I want it to keep going. I never want this to stop. I don't want Dickinson to ever stop us, but also like for us to stop us. I know that it's a really, really hard time, but I just imagined people to be dependent on us for these conversations, to have this space on campus. And it makes me happy to think that my work and my effort and my time goes into other people. And that's what I would love to continuously do.
Amanda, how you stepped up into a leadership role, a big leadership role this time. Can you talk to us about that? Is Amanda frozen? Okay, Amanda's frozen, so we'll come back to that question. So I want to ask a question of all of you. What makes you most proud of this effort? Is it a particular workshop? Is it, for those of you who were involved from the beginning, is it that it's continuing, right? Technically, this would have been our third year had it not been for the pandemic, but it's still moving, right? So when you think about, when I say Women of Color Summit, what comes to mind? What brings pride to your mind? What do you think about when I say that? TT, I'm going to swing to you first.
Okay. I love the question, because I think it allows us to collectively be in a moment of reflection, which has not happened. So thank you again, Bronte, for creating this forum for us to do so. I think there's so many things that come to mind for me, and the first one has to be resilience. I watched myself, Preeti, Joanne, work with Dana, Tony Ann, and Sarah's idea, and struggle in the library for countless hours to figure out, how are we going to do this? What idea did they just bring to us? Like, you guys want to achieve a summit and you reunite alumni who don't want to come to campus because of their bleak experiences, faculty and staff that we are not connected with in that way unless we're taking their courses, and also our community in Carlisle and surrounding areas. Okay, we have a mission on our hands, but I saw the way we struggled every night. You know, we'd be in the library doing homework and also planning a summit, going from one meeting here and there. So I think it was our resilience that stood out to me. And because of that resilience, we made it our responsibility to say, we have given ourselves a second job on campus. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of just saying we're going to study like every other student, the majority students, and just have spaces made for us and be welcomed into them. But we're going to take up another job, and we're going to fight to have access to resources to make something powerful for ourselves. And hopefully it inspire others. And we were lucky and fortunate to achieve that goal. So that's a story of resilience.
Okay, Preeti, what comes to mind when you think about the summit?
Like Titi said, a lot of it, right? The planning part was a big part of who I became after the summit. I think that really, it honestly changed who I am as a person and who I thought I was when I said I identified as a woman of color. There was so much reflection that went into this planning that by the time the summit was complete, I thought I was a different person. You know, I could have never imagined myself getting up on a stage in front of 200 people and talking. Like, that was something that just wasn't me. And then here, you know, TT, Joanne, and Un were like, do it. And I'm like, okay. You know, that was so strong and powerful for me. But I think the other part that I was proud of was the fact that we were able to achieve this in such a short amount of time, and that we were able to meet alumni who came back on campus and told us that, you know, they hadn't been back for 10, 20 years, and they came back because of the summit. That really hit my heart, because that meant a lot when somebody told us that because of what we did and what we created, they hoped and they saw, they were, you know, hopeful for this Dickinson as a campus to be like, you know what, I can go back and talk to these women because that was my school. And the fact that they were able to resonate meant a lot for me. And I'm very proud of that.
Okay, I'm just going across the top of my screen. So Dana, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think I resonate a lot with the same sentiment that's going around about, I have so many like aha moments. But I think for me, my biggest kind of full circle moment was being able to come back to the Women of Color Summit as an alum, but also plan that sort of agenda that was happening at the summit that I came back. Because, while I was planning it, I obviously wanted to get as much as I can from the summit, but I think it's very interesting to then plan something and then be an attendee of it, and just an attendee. So not kind of leading the workshops. And I found so much value from it. And, this is what I realized will always anchor me to Dickinson, because prior to the Women of Color Summit, I'm not going to lie, there really isn't anything that's anchoring me to Dickinson. But to see that I'm participating as an alum and I'm willing, and I, woke up and made it to the summit on a Saturday when I didn't have to, which kind of was like a very full circle moment. But another thing that I think that I was really proud of was, I'm really passionate about people, storytelling, and being able to create community, and to be able to see how much the summit has grown and become so important to, all of the planning members, to the people who are attending, to the alums, like, means so much to me. Because when Tony Ann and Sarah and I had thought of this idea, we would have never imagined in a million years that would have ever turned into something as important and special as it is. So I will always hold that to my heart, very, very near and dear to my heart. And I think it really gave me a lot of perspective on my capabilities and my understanding, and how much I am passionate about, people and connection and building community, especially for people who look like me, and even, just people who aren't always represented all the time.
Okay. Jimeno.
I think I'm really proud of the woman, like the most incredible woman on campus, to be part of this committee and to be making a mark on campus, so that we can look back at Dickinson and look at the improvements and the changes that we've made for the better for future incoming students. I'm very proud of that. Sorry. But there was the question was like, what do I think when I think about the Women of Color Summit? The first thing that came up to mind was our 8 a.m. meetings with Bronte. And I don't know why that comes up, but waking up in the morning for me is like really, really hard. But every other week or every week we had this meeting, but Bronte would always show up with just like snacks, like muffins and breakfast foods and fruits and yogurt. And that, it's just like, it's like, yeah, she got us. And it's like, she's always there for you. And that just warms up my heart. And just to be able to be part of this community. This is a community. So just being a part of it just makes me feel so proud. And I hope that we can continue to do this. So thank you, Bronte, for all the food that you provided us in the morning.
Got it. Joanne, what do you think of? I can't tell whether Joanne is slightly frozen or not. So I'm going to pivot to, it's okay. What comes to mind?
Okay. Definitely what Jimeno said about waking up early. Because yes, it was kind of hard waking up early sometimes, but it was learning how to do it with grace, learning how to take on another part of my routine with grace. And while the fruit was amazing, it felt like, okay, I can do anything I need to and want to do for the rest of the day. Like, I have the endurance, the confidence to do that. And I know that the people in my circle, the women in my circle, are rooting for me, and I'm rooting for them. So it didn't feel like I was doing it on my own. It felt like a team effort. And that's how you build community. You do it with the work. And yeah.
Sounds good. Elif. What comes to mind when you think about the summit?
I think for me are all the preliminary events that we had. Um, I think that they were just so interesting and so unique, and they were mostly events that Dickinson hadn't seen before, and like the collaborations, the conversations that we had. It was just very interesting to hear the different perspectives from different women of color and how they navigated campus and the things that they experienced on campus, because like every woman of color experienced something different on this campus, and it was just interesting to hear everybody's outlook. And it's definitely something that like every time I think about women of color, it's just like, oh wow, like so this is how women of color actually feel on campus, and how um, they try to overcome things. They try to like build different networks and stuff like that.
Thanks, Ella. Joanne, I think you're ready to go.
Yes. When I think about the Women of Color Summit, I think about legacy, a collective legacy. Every single woman of color who is a Dickinsonian, that's a part of our mission, that it's embarked on this journey, has a legacy, has a reason to come back to this campus. And that will envision me being like 60 years old and me coming back, chatting with other people and reconnecting. And that's what drives me to continue to cultivate community and reach out to the people that I pass the baton to, and continue these conversations, because I believe that it's a collection of all of our imprints on it. And I think about healing, the stories of our alums who have graduated Dickinson's campus and still have that trauma, and it's gone unaddressed, right? The platform is so powerful because didn't realize initially it had the potential and the capacity to heal. And that weekend, for the very first year of the summit, we realized that healing was happening in that space. It was so powerful. And that reinforces the reason why having, women of color only in that space is so important, because we haven't been allotted the time, the energy, and the space to really unpack the hurt that Dickinson has caused many of us. And until the college fully understands that, and that the Women of Color Summit is something that college needs, and it's the answer, that, I think that's kind of the biggest thing. It's really important. And then this other piece about allyship, I don't see anywhere else that we talk about this, that we have authentic dialogues about what allyship means. And we're trying to dive deep into that so that the result is the change that we want. And that's pushing boundaries that, again, I don't see where that's happening elsewhere. So it's something that I'm forever proud of. And it's something that I always look to my Dickinson experience and look to my right and my left and see these beautiful women of color who stood right next to me and worked their butt off. I like to joke and say, but it's real. Like, I lost my edges that year. Like, it was a lot. It was a lot of stress. But I learned about my potential, my capacity, and the fire that continues to be within me. And I look forward to enabling and empowering other people as the cohorts keep on growing, and that this is going to be a community. Like, every time we come back to the summit, it's going to be a reunion of love, of joy, of healing. And that's what I look forward to.
Thanks, Joanne. Amanda, let us hear from you, Amanda.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So, oh my God, I was listening and everything that everyone has said is just so real. So when I joined the summit, I missed the weekend that we had it. I missed the Saturday, but the Sunday was so, I don't know, it was so impactful, and I guess I was so intrigued by how everyone reacted to the entire weekend that I was like, I want to be a part of this. Like this is something that I like always wanted to do. So then um when we finally had it on, when me and Himeno and the rest of the team planned it, it was when we did it, I think Bronte could tell I was really nervous. I didn't believe that anyone was gonna come, first of all, and I was also really nervous because I felt that TT and Dana and Isoke and um, Arliv had like left such a huge legacy, and I was just so worried of passing on that legacy and making sure that other people, that we could be able to kind of make bigger what you guys had already done. And I think what I got from the summit was like believing that we could really make a mark if we really wanted to, and the strength that like we can actually, if we, there's like strength in numbers. And I don't know, like seeing people come together even when they didn't have to, like the Saturday and the Sunday, it was a whole day, 2 whole day thing, and it was on Zoom. So I was like, are you really gonna come? But they did come. And so it just showed me that there are some people that are unwilling, but there are people that are willing to do the work, but they just need some sort of guidance or some sort of platform for them to be able to express themselves and to put their mind to work. And so I felt like the Women of Color is that platform to engage those conversations and to talk about things that we wouldn't otherwise feel comfortable talking about in other spaces at Dickinson. And so that's what I felt from the summit. And in future years, I just really hope that it keeps going and other people feel the same way and get the same impact that we have been able to get from it.
Thanks, Amanda. TT, you want to add something?
Yes, and when I also came back to the Women of Color Summit, WOC as we like to call it, I think what was really crucial for us as a community was knowing that it could be sustainable and that we would have the financial support that we needed. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that Bronte was willing to give a major donation for us to continue the Women of Color Summit, which gave us so much peace, because with all the questions about it's an exclusive thing, we don't want to fund it, or we aren't sure if we can continue to fund it, that was such a big moment for us to receive the support of another woman of color on campus. And also knowing that that's what the legacy we hope to all continue to give back to this summit, to give back to the women of color who attend Dickinson, and the initiatives that those women will birth, which will effectively, affect the entire campus. So knowing that the investment of a woman of color in other women of color is not just for women of color, but for the entire Dickinson community, that's such a big deal for all of us. And that's why we're able to still be here and connected and continue the legacy of what was a great vision that 3 amazing women started.
Sunny, you shared a little earlier about how you came into this project. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I also had some full circle moments. And I'm especially kind of thinking about the theme for this year, which was tending to the roots of past, present, and future. And I was in a session that Tiffany Chang Lawson was leading, and she was one of my classmates. And I actually remember when I was a first year meeting her, she was one of the first people I met being like, oh, you look like me, and I'm really grateful for that. And in her session, she was just being such a boss, like she always is, and, just giving amazing advice. And for me, it was this like real moment where I was like, wow, we were classmates. We both went through this struggle as well. You're here, you were brought in by our executive committee, and now you're just like sharing all of your knowledge because that's what you do. You invest in people. And, it's amazing to me because there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to continue, and that the importance is felt by everybody. I think the piece where we have alumna come back and who have no interest in coming back, but now they do, it just makes it so that as students, women of color coming through Dickinson, that they feel heard and they feel safe, and they feel, that when they leave, they can look back and also lift those who are now in their position. And so, I'm so grateful. Joanne, big shout out to you because, without you, I don't know if I'd be here. So thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I would simply add that I remember when Dana, Sarah, and Tony came to my office with this idea and closed the door and said, this is what we want to do. And it was late in the spring semester. And I said, there's no way for us to do this and do this well. And this isn't the kind of thing that you want to do and kind of, you don't want to half-ass this, I'm sorry. So it's a great idea, but we can't do that. That's not how we're going to do. And so the next year, when a group of folks, TT and Joanne and Priti and on and on and on and on, made their way to my office, and we started talking about what it looked like, that was powerful. It was powerful. And then it gained momentum. And then it was time for the event. And the thing that I love most about this is watching you all find your voice and to come into your power, right? Because we've been plotting along, and then we get to the event, and to see the pride that you had on your faces when we actually pulled it off. And TT, we must start everything on time. TT, look at the clock, right? But by the time we got to the last segment, the look of pride, excitement, Joanne, I will not forget your face on that, the last day, right? And so come full circle. I know that you all didn't like coming to my office at 8 o'clock in the morning, so that's why I made sure you had quiche and yogurt and whatnot, right? But we started to put together programming that we all felt good about, bringing back the first two women who lived in the res halls and hearing their experiences. That was powerful. Hearing from the great-granddaughter of the first woman of color to graduate from Dickinson, that was powerful. And to start the summit in that way, right? And so I think the programming that we've put into place, Jimeno, when you emailed over the summer, and I know you were nervous about, well, Bronte, how do we make this go, right? And then Amanda came along and it happened. But to watch you all come into yourselves, right? Because you start as one young woman, and I can see all your potential. But by the time we get to the other end of some of this, the way that your confidence level, that's what does it for me. And that's what I want you to take away from this, because we are a village and we do have to support one another. But now we also have to encourage those who come behind you to take the baton, right? And so I'm going to ask each one of you for a word to all the women of color on the campus currently and who are coming, a word for them about why we must keep this programming going. A word. It can be 2 words, but this is about passing the baton. This is about passing the baton. So Dana, as one of the original founders and visionaries, I'm starting with you and I'm coming to each one of you. And it could be a phrase, it could be a couple of words, but this is about how do we make sure this continues? Dana.
Okay. So you said one word to make that describes how we can continue this summit, right?
Or to encourage others to carry the baton.
Okay. I would say I'm going to cheat a little bit because this is just too near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to say healing safe space.
TT.
Still I rise.
Got that. Priti.
I'm going to steal something I heard from the Women of Color Summit this weekend. Resistance is rest.
I like that. Jimeno.
Inspired and impact.
Okay. Joanne. We'll come back. It's okay.
Don't settle.
Okay. I got that. Amanda.
I would say that you are seen, you are loved, and you are appreciated.
Okay. Ella.
Wait, Ella, we can't hear you.
You're muted.
I would say do it for the adrenaline and excitement it brings.
Joanne, can you?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I said don't settle.
Got it. Got it. It's okay.
I would say I believed I could, so I did. We believed we could, so we did.
Got it. Sunny, you don't get left out of this.
Thank you. To thrive and not just survive.
Okay. And I would say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And this is a journey that I am so blessed to have taken with each one of you. And I look forward to us passing the baton on and on and on. I consider you all my little sisters. I am so proud of each and every one of you. I thank you for the programming that you brought to Dickinson because there was a need. And you should be very proud of yourselves that you didn't wait for us to put it into place for you. You did it for yourself. So with that, my sisters, I say I love you. Thank you. Good night.
This message has been brought to you by the National Black Leadership and Empowerment Project.